Hello and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. Darnell Goldson and Ed Joyner make New Haven tick. They are the elected members of the Board of Education. Welcome to the WNHH studio, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And we also should give thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support to today's program. And so, gentlemen, you asked actually to come on the air, and I'm honored that you made the time, because recently we had a Mayor Monday program in which Mayor Tony Harp and I were reflecting on whether having elected members of the Board of Education was helping or hurting the process of education. I'm going to throw it to you in a second. Just got to ask our station manager something. All right, so who wants to hit it first? I think, Darnell, you hit me first. So the criticism is that it's politicized education. So in 2013, we began having elections for Board of Ed. You two ran unopposed. You're the members of the board, and you won the popular votes. City divided in half for each district. And, okay, you know, if you could turn your phone off, that'll help.
Turn it off.
Okay, sorry. So the criticism is that once it got all Democratic, it got messy. That we had fights all the time, political agendas, rather than focus on doing education. The other point of view was that, and the reason we went to a partly elected Board of Ed, it's not even fully elected. It's not even majority elected. It's mostly appointed by the mayor, approved by the Board of Alders, but then you have these two elected members plus a non-voting student member who I think should be voting. That's just my editorial comment. So the other argument was that when the mayor used to appoint the Board of Ed, they never talked about anything or held anyone accountable or scrutiny. So yeah, you didn't fight, but you also had pretty big problems in the schools that weren't being addressed. So we were saying that in a representative democracy, you get to vote for your mayor every 2 years. You vote for your alder every 2 years. So you hold them accountable if other appointees aren't doing well. So you don't need to elect every appointee. So what was your feedback on that, Darnell?
Well, first I'd like to make a few corrections. We didn't run unopposed.
You didn't run unopposed?
No, there's a three-part process to running for this position. First, you have to get the nomination by.
Let's get in the mic. Yeah.
You have to get the nomination by your party. Both of us, I believe, had opponents to our nominations,
but they didn't end up making it to a primary, right?
Right.
Mine did.
Oh, yours did.
I ran against a Republican.
Right.
Who never showed up.
Well, yeah,
but he still had an opponent.
We had a team of detectives and bloodhounds looking for your opponent. We couldn't find him anywhere.
I would argue that some of the Republicans in Congress haven't shown up either.
So they've showed up and caused some havoc, but which is democracy. First of all, the majority of the boards of education in Connecticut are elected boards.
We're one of only two.
All but two.
In the entire state.
And 100 towns.
And they seem to work fairly well. The other argument I would make is that our board hasn't had elected members for many, many years, and I haven't seen much progress in terms of the achievement gap for African American boys and girls and Latino boys and girls.
Just how the schools ran. I mean, I think we can make it a given that there was not much scrutiny.
There was not much scrutiny, and there wasn't much democracy, quite frankly. If you have to depend on one person for your participation in the process, then that person has total control.
Does that mean, do you think we should be electing the building official appointed by the mayor? Should we be electing the development administrator? Should we be electing the zoning board? Should we have elections? We have a lot of boards and commissions, fire commission, police commission. Should these all be elected positions?
The Board of Education is nearly half of the city budget. I think we certainly should have.
So it says a special place.
I believe it is. The state has determined it is.
And you're also saying, Ed Joyner, that we're outliers, because we're still outliers, right? We are.
90% of the boards in this state are elected.
Fully elected.
And
we're still minority elected.
Right. And I think it's unfair to say that the problem on the board is elected official, because there's not just two, there's three of us. The mayor was elected. The mayor and Darnell and I were elected.
Do you think the mayor should be on the Board of Ed?
Yes.
Why?
I'm going to answer that as well.
I think because, most
if you guys keep agreeing, we're going to give up a democracy.
Well, we didn't agree on this yet.
Well, first of all, we go way back. So
yeah.
don't.
He was my teacher giving me spankings in school.
Right.
But I do believe
good
that's
old
how
days.
old we are. But I do believe that the mayor should be represented on the board. Absolutely. I mean, most people make her responsible or he responsible for education in the city, so they should have some voice there.
So just
let me disagree.
Yeah, I'm with Ed Joyner before even hearing about it.
I think the mayor should be on the board, but I don't think she should be able to appoint anyone to the board. I think it should be an all-elected board. Secondly, the mayor is not responsible for education in this city.
It's a state charter.
It's a state, right.
But voters still hold the mayor responsible.
Well, some do. I mean, the bottom line is that the people responsible for education in this city really are the teacher and the student. The student has to work hard, the teacher has to teach well.
But who holds them accountable?
Well, the state does, legally.
Right.
So I don't know how anybody could be a leader and not believe that the law is
Well, one
important.
argument for having the mayor then appoint at least some members is that, yes, half the budget, right, comes from the state, but half comes from the city.
And if the mayor appoints members to the board, she's going to be held responsible for the board.
Right.
But there should be a criteria and a standard for members of the board.
See, the reason I think, so I have a third of you.
That's really important.
I don't see why the mayor should sit on any board. The mayor makes appointments to boards, so you're saying the mayor shouldn't make appointments to this one, and is held accountable for votes of that. But if the mayor gets involved in the day-to-day decision-making of boards that are supposed to operate with some autonomy, I think there's a problem of having a chief executive too much in the weeds of everything.
It is. It raises the specter of patronism. It raises patronage, rather. It raises the specter of.
But you also don't want your CEO on committees.
You don't. You don't. Absolutely not.
Well, it would be. I think that would be the case if you had a board that was totally run by and responsible to the city. But the Board of Education is a unique animal. It's actually chartered by the state. So of course I believe probably the mayor's inclusion was exactly because of that, because it was a state organization. The mayor wanted to have some voice at that process.
Well, let's brush up on our Latin a little bit. De jure and de facto. In this city, de jure, certainly we are a creature of the state, but de facto, if the mayor can appoint people, particularly people who have limited background in education, if the mayor can do that, then de facto the board becomes her board.
Except for the interregnum when you have a switch of mayors. So the mayor didn't get control of this board until a couple of years into her tenure.
And really the quality and knowledge base of people on any committee determines how well that committee functions.
Mm-hmm. And you're hearing about that from Ed Joyner and Darnell Goldson, the two elected members of the New Haven Board of Education here on Dateline New Haven at WNHH, your home for community radio, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhaven10.org. So a year ago, you two were one of you challenged the other to a duel at this famous Board of Ed meeting, and there was pandemonium in the hall, and you apologized after Ed. But that was a symbol. That was the coming to a head years of conflict on this board since we went to an elected board. We went from a board that slept through years of decision-making and never held anyone accountable to a board that had so much infighting that meetings were going on for hours with harsh things said to people, and you had to have retreats that were like marriage therapy sessions.
Well, they weren't marriage therapy sessions. We had retreats, but the bottom line is that there were some, since we're using marriage as a metaphor, irreconcilable differences between various members of the board. Darnell and I didn't have any major conflict until the superintendent search.
When we got it now, so because of the elected board, the former superintendent was pushed out of the job. There was a feeling he wasn't doing the job.
It's not because of the elected board.
No.
There were several appointed members. I mean, there were
you built
more
the
than a majority of members.
But when you had a board that was asleep
Absolutely.
and unelected, it never questioned a superintendent whether a superintendent should be there. Right?
That may not.
I'm not saying that's good, Darnell. I'm saying that's a fact.
But my point is, it may not have been so much because of the members, but because of who the superintendent was. Reggie Mayo was a strong superintendent that got along well with his staff, got along well with political factions in the city, and was able to maneuver through that, and also had a good relationship with the state Board of Education.
Not only that, he was a teacher, a director, a department head, a principal.
Well, no one understood how the city worked better than Reggie Mayo.
Absolutely, and he understands how education works.
And also, you're not to cross them because there are consequences.
Well,
Just saying. You don't mess with Reggie, you do mess with Reggie.
I've been there.
I've been there too.
The other good thing about Dr. Mayo is that Dr. Mayo could walk in any house in this city and be respected because people realized the great contribution he had made to children as a teacher, as an assistant principal, as a principal, and what have you. And our previous superintendent graduated from Stanford Law School with no teaching experience, no principal experience.
I always learn something.
And he was hired by an appointed board.
Yeah. So you're saying that the irreconcilable differences grew from the search for the successor, which was a really messy search. It went on for a long time, a lot of fighting. A lot of people who were strong contenders said they didn't want to come to New Haven because of the politics of the Board of Ed.
And others did want to.
Absolutely.
And would the argument, Darnell, be that we don't want someone who doesn't want to deal with what they call politics, but what you might be called in holding someone accountable?
I've lived all over the country, and I've been involved in politics since I was out of high school. And I got to tell you, New Haven is as tough as any city out there when it comes to politics. And if you cannot manage that process, then you're not going to be able to manage being.
So you're saying it might be a good thing, given that if the Board of Ed didn't have elected members and didn't hold the superintendent accountable, you worried that a superintendent would be lured here or then not be ready to deal with all the politics?
You have to go through the fire. We have a 30-member board of aldermen. We have a large state delegation. We have a lot of town committee people out there who are very involved. Yes, I think that anyone that can't go through a hiring process certainly is not going to be ready for serving on this board.
And Darnell, if you wouldn't mind going closer to the mic.
Paul, I would argue that
it's making Ed sound more authoritative because he's got the deeper voice to begin with, and then he's right there on the mic.
Yeah. I would argue that compared to some of the cities I've worked in, New Haven is a cream puff.
Really?
I've worked in 29 states. I've worked with ministers of education in a number of countries in Europe and Caribbean and what have you. And I've been in situations where a city in the Midwest where a white board member threatened to hit a black female board member with a Coke bottle.
Well,
I've been in situations where two board members in Brooklyn got in a fight and they both had to be taken to the hospital in the same emergency wagon.
So all you guys did was like an 18th century line out of a
No,
movie.
listen. I have been physically accosted in the parking lot by a preacher, no less, when we were working.
I thought he was laying hands on you, Darnell. I didn't think he was accosting you. I thought he was laying hands on you.
He bumped me.
But what would happen when you lay hands if you got a missive from upstairs that isn't so kind?
Actually, I thought
this city is as tough as any other.
Well, you got to go to Dallas.
The Coke bottle's pretty serious.
Coke bottle's pretty serious.
So what about that, though? If someone looks at the city and says, okay, two members of the board are having this, in the end, you weren't really going to have a duel. But, that you had this, this thread.
I wasn't sure about that.
You know darn well. if your parents were alive, and I know your sisters and brothers can attest to the fact that I love you like a son.
We're still talking about having a duel as a fundraiser.
Yeah, but it's a dance contest.
But I get to choose the weapon because I was challenged.
It's a dance contest. We'll have a dance contest.
Well, I'll lose that, so we have to do something.
Well, or we can have a singing contest.
I'll definitely lose that. Next.
So let me give you an example of how this debate plays out every time. So last night there was a committee meeting of the Board of Ed about giving out some contracts, right? And they involved Integrated Wellness Group, which has gotten contracts for many years with social emotional learning. This was about a VETS program about which people raised some serious questions, and some parents had questions they felt weren't being answered. So it got sent back, so you guys would deliberate a little longer. And then the second revelation that, in fact, the people leading that group are taking over the New Haven Family Alliance. I don't know if you saw that.
That is not a revelation. It is not even true at this point. I know that they're in negotiations to discuss that.
We called the board member last night who said the person's been running the meetings.
Who's been what?
Been the chair. The member of that board said the new chair is the person from Integrated Wellness.
And Integrated Wellness person says she's not the chair of that group.
Okay. Well, in any case, the negotiations there.
You know what, Paul? I don't even know why we're having a conversation because we don't have librarians in schools. We don't have paraprofessionals. We don't have enough secretaries.
So that's budget. And I do want to talk, but part of the question about budget is how we spend money, though.
Absolutely. We should not be spending money on anything but that which is essential to the children in the school district.
But you're a big, at Joyner, one of your claims to fame, you've had many years, you and Darnell have many years of accomplishments in civic service in the city, and yours includes working for the Comer Method organization.
I was the executive director of the school
development
program.
You went around the country talking about that. So the kind of work you were talking about in these contracts is front and center of the Comer Method, that we're saying you can't have people learning in schools if we don't have social emotional learning.
And in the districts I worked in, that work was done by professional educators and professional service providers. We can't let the board be a patronage bin in the city.
Is that what was happening last night?
I think that's what's been happening for a while, personally. We don't listen. We don't have any competitive bidding for these contracts. We don't. In some cases, people are providing services using third-party subcontractors. We don't have any evidence that any of these programs have worked because there's no evaluation attached to them. And if you want to talk about the Chroma work and what we've done across the country, the great majority of that work was done by professional educators.
So is your issue that these contracts should happen, but they should happen on a bid basis with people with a better background and more results showing?
First of all, you got to have a needs assessment to see whether or not you need these people beyond your professional paid staff. Secondly, you should look to your paid staff first. I know that when I was a principal, some of the after-school programs, we hired teachers and teachers that were affected with the kids that we were trying to reach. They already know them, they know their parents, and what have you. And instead of bringing in people.
So are you going to vote no on these
Yeah,
contracts?
absolutely, I'm going to vote no.
Yeah.
Darnell,
you definitely got a side
I would
here.
counter that our administration and our superintendent has made those recommendations to us. They are the paid professionals that we should be supporting, and they say they need these services for our children, and I want to support them in that.
I don't know if that's
I would
true.
also say that there were several non-bid contracts that were passed that evening that not a question was asked about. We
But
passed
the issue is
we
because
passed a
they said there
contract for
weren't-
Comer
Yeah.
with a no-bid contract. We passed a contract for ACES.
Let me respond.
Which
to that.
was
there
four
were,
times
there
as
were
much as
results
that.
given. They did; those other organizations
And
did give you the results.
so has this grouut that we're discussing from last
Let-
night. They actually gave a 35, 45-minute presentation at our last meeting, a presentation with all of their evaluative.
So why are they being questioned unlike the others?
Well, you got it.
I'd like to ask Darnell a question.
But before you get this,
Okay.
Darnell Goldson was the one last night
Mhm.
who said the person asking from the group. I don't like to single out people. It's not
Right,
about the
right.
person. The person said, "I don't feel I should be answering any of these questions. How much we pay people?" And it was Darnell who supported the contract, who
No.
said to the person,
Okay, go ahead.
"It is this is public money, and we should be able to ask
Good
questions."
for Darnell.
We not only should we be able to ask questions, but we should get answers to questions before
Right.
we approve those contracts. And I don't think that the person was concerned about providing information that she had. She was concerned about providing the information of those individual employees that she was hiring. Unfortunately for her,
I see. She didn't want to say Joe's
She
making
was-
X dollars.
That's-
That's
that's
embarrassing.
correct.
Was that the question? I wasn't there.
yes, that was the question. The
'Cause
question was
I was
was
told that I couldn't comment at a finance meeting.
Why is
no,
that?
he wasn't.
Well, I was told that. It's in the minutes. Mr. Cotto said to me when I asked the question at the first meeting I attended, he said, "Mr. Joyner, you can't speak." Then he
Now,
got,
Mr. Cotto
That's
is in
different
a-
from being being told you can't attend.
And then he got an opinion, and then I'm not going to attend unless I can speak. I got other things to do with my time. And then he got an opinion from Mr. Golson, who sort of supported the fact that I couldn't come to a committee.
Oh, that is not true.
I can show you the emails.
That is absolutely not true.
At least that's how you interpret
no.
it.
What I said
I'll
was
just share
what
the
I said
emails.
was the chairman is responsible for running his meetings, and he could determine who participates and who doesn't.
And of
That's
course,
what I
And
said.
of course, he interpreted that as, Dr. Joyner, you can't speak. So
And he was wrong. And he was wrong to make that
I
interpretation.
wish you had told him that.
I
would've-
did.
If you had, I would have gone to
Because
meetings
Darnell,
and
now here's the
spoken.
thing: that guy Jamel Cotto was actually appointed by the mayor,
Right.
a political appointment.
Mhm.
A lot less experience than you two have
Right.
in meetings. Darnell was on the board of aldermen for many years,
Right.
and he was an alder who showed up at meetings he was in a committee of and asked those questions.
Mhm.
So you're saying that Jamel Cotto didn't understand that happened.
Well, he told me I couldn't speak, so I didn't go to the meetings. Why would I do that? I could be writing policy to deal with procurement.
The chairman has the right to make sure that his meeting is running
Well,
smoothly.
he's not the
and
chair. He's not the chair.
What does smoothly
Frank
mean?
Redente is the chair of that committee.
he felt that.
Let me correct.
I'm not going to speak for Jamel.
No, you're right. You
Frank-
don't-
Frank
but didn't
Redente-
Darnell just
Frank
make the
Redente-
argument that people make when they don't like an elected board of ed?
Yeah.
You said he should be able to have them decide what it means to have a meeting run smoothly, which can mean don't ask questions. Your whole argument for an elected board of ed is we need people who will ask questions because the old
Absolutely.
people didn't.
No, I don't think the issue was around asking questions. I think the issue was around who was participating and how they're
Actually,
participating.
the question I asked was about procurement.
And quite frankly, I'm not going to get into a discussion about that meeting and about how he ran it.
Okay,
I
but in
think
any
that
case,
his
Ed, Johnny, you
interpretation
said
of
you're
his-
going to vote no. How are you going to vote on this?
How am I going to vote on what?
The contracts that were up last night for the
I'm
vets
going
program.
to vote to move forward all of those no bid contracts,
And Paul,
including ACES, including Comer,
let me tell you,
and including all of the other groups that the superintendent has asked us, has recommended to us to move forward on.
Paul, let me tell you why I'm going to vote no. First of all, we have been doing this right for a long time. If you think about what the state says about professional services contracts, what national organizations say about professional services contract, there's a standard that you follow. There's a protocol in the process you follow. The first thing you have to do is determine whether or not you need the service, and whether or not the service that you're asking for is a duplication of services.
They have determined that?
Can I finish, my dear brother, whom I love dearly? So we didn't do any of that. And by the way, the state is just as complicit, because when Pryor was the Commissioner of Education, there were a lot of no-bid contracts that the state awarded. And the state was also, certain people in the state were steering turnaround schools to adopt certain programs. I can prove that too. I have emails to prove that. Now, what we've done is that we've taken public funds and we've allowed people that haven't necessarily bid for them in an open competition, have not demonstrated their credentials, and I want to say that ACES, Comer, and Clifford Beers it's a false equivalency to compare them to a group of people who got together.
That's convenient.
No, it's not.
That's convenient.
And I'll.
She's proved.
If you let me finish. If you let me finish.
How much time do we have?
Yeah, we do have to let
if you let me finish, I'll tell you why it's a false equivalency. First of all, Clifford Beers has been in business for 100 years, over 100 years. It is the first outpatient mental health clinic in America.
So is that how we determined
the
how we give our grants?
Was the sole source. I would argue that's the sole source
Oh,
provider.
my goodness.
The Comer program was evaluated by the U.S. Office of Education and proven to be the only school reform program in America that got academic gains and social emotional gains.
I'm not questioning this.
ACES is a creation of the state legislation. And July 1st, 1972, the state decreed that they would have regional educational agencies that would provide services to clusters of schools.
Paul,
Let me finish. So here we
am
go.
I just a prop
These
here
are
or
the
what?
facts.
We got to let Darnell talk too.
Am I a prop?
ACES is legally authorized to provide services to the schools in the region. New Haven is one of them. So comparing those three to a very young organization that has no scientifically randomized studies to indicate that they're effective is really a false equivalency. And I'll rest my case.
All right, now we talk to the senator from Connecticut, Darnell Goldson.
Yeah, look, the fact is that we're either going to be fair and do it the same way for everybody, or don't do it at all. Okay, the fact is, Comer has a lot of experience out there. They have a lot of accolades.
They've been evaluated.
ACES, and so has Integrated Wellness, and not only that,
By
but
whom?
she's an award-winning author who has
Darnell,
not
I'm an award-winning author.
Now I'm still a prop. I mean, can I talk?
I'm sorry.
All right,
I'm sorry.
thank you,
Tasha. I'm not doing this.
But Paul, the fact is, we should be fair to everybody. This lady, this organization apparently has been vetted by this administration. They felt comfortable that she could do the work. She's done the work previously and has gotten accolades from this administration.
So your argument is that if the professional staff of the Board of Ed does the vetting, that's vetting and evaluating. Ed, your point seems to be
that's argument Ed makes every week.
Outside groups of expertise, like a government, an independent body. So that's different opinion. I think that's called democracy.
It is.
So
but there's more scientific evidence on my side in terms of sole source status. And also, if Mr. Golson wants to do everything that the professionals asked him to do, I would hope that he would extend that to the superintendent from this day on. Whatever she recommends, he should support it.
Right. Isn't the point of elected board that you don't just support everything the staff says?
Absolutely not. I mean, why would we have a board if we did that?
So your argument was that the reason you're voting for it is because she said it.
No, I'm saying that the main thing is that she made the recommendation. I vetted her recommendation. I looked at the facts. I asked the questions. And then I, along with a majority of board members, will make a decision, yes or no.
She recommended a talent officer for the district as well.
Yeah, she had. Well,
I would hope you would support that.
I haven't seen the recommendation yet.
I hope
and
you
when she
support it.
does make the recommendation, I'll make a decision based on the case that she makes.
So there was an article about this morning. I hope everyone felt it was a fair article. I thought it was, by Christopher Peak, about what happened last night.
No, it wasn't a fair article. But
Oh, which part was unfair?
Go ahead.
No, it matters.
No, ask your questions and I'll tell you what.
No, I'm going to move to something else.
I don't have it in front of me, so.
Okay.
I do. I think it was a fair article. In fact,
You weren't even there.
No, I think it was a fair article because first of all, everything he said can be substantiated. Secondly, he probably is the second coming of Bob Woodward.
That's true, but he also didn't take a stand. If you read that article,
just wrote the article.
There were both sides.
That's fair.
But in any case, that's not the point. The point is I want to make sure you had a chance to
I read it.
weigh in. Okay.
I read it. I just haven't. I skimmed over it on the way here.
Okay. But I guess here are the two things people said about it on the Independent site. Paul Wessel said, all this kind of makes you yearn for the days when the Board of Education was appointed entirely by the mayor and you had someone to hold accountable for the dysfunction. Reverend Samuel T. Ross Lee responded, Paul Wessel, engaging conversation about matters and clearing up confusion before one's vote for or against them is not dysfunction. It's called democracy.
Sure is. It's
Is
messy.
it,
Right.
is it
Right.
safe to say that this is something Ed Joyner and Darnell, who are now on Dateline New Haven and WNHH-FM, your home for community radio, 103.5 FM, live streamed at independent.org?
Great parenthetical.
Is it fair to say that the discussion we just had for 15 minutes is an example
Absolutely.
of why you two believe we should have an elected board of ed?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We got agreement, guys.
Listen, Darnell is one of the brightest kids at Hill House, and a person who leaves his job often to come back and work in the city. He loves the city. I love the city. I love him, and especially his wife and his daughter and his sisters and brothers. And
Vice versa.
And no one can accuse him of not studying the issue. We don't agree on everything. I think he's wrong about the contracting, but we still care about each other. We talk a lot.
All
And
right.
we will
So now, one
continue to
thing you
talk.
guys are talking a lot about, and the city's talking a lot about, is a structural deficit at the Board of Education. These are hard times for government. It's interesting. We've had we're 1 year away from the longest post-recession recovery in the history of the country. Obviously, it's been an uneven recovery, and it hasn't been good for state governments and local governments. I would argue that that's partly because of long-term decisions that were deferred about pensions, but also there's an anti-tax movement in this country that started with Proposition, I forget, it was 13 in California with Howard Jarvis, that now just means that people don't believe in paying taxes for government. But in any case, you got this mess. You're an elected Board of Ed. Darnell, you're the president. And right now, we're not really going to get enough money to do what we've been doing. So you've had to do this deliberative, and I would argue it's been a very deliberative and careful and positive process when you've tried to figure out how to cut a whole lot of money. I think it was originally $19 million.
It's over 20.
20,
Yeah,
and how to cut that without cutting instruction for students, and while still trying to do the stuff we care about, like social emotional learning. We're still, close to $9 million away from solving that structural deficit, correct? So what are we going to do?
We're going to keep struggling with it and keep cutting away and finding ways to get around it and just pray a lot too. I got to tell you, it's not easy trying to make these decisions. You know, closing those 3 schools last year was
Why
was
aren't
not
we
an easy
closing
process.
more?
We want to. Well, I don't say we want to. We have to. And I believe we're probably going to close at least 2 more schools.
But
Which
yet we
one?
just opened another one.
Well,
Obama?
No, we just opened the Montessori school. We just
Oh, yeah.
we
we didn't
extended
open.
it.
But
You voted for
Montessori
that,
was
though, didn't
already
you?
No, I
open.
voted against it.
Oh, okay.
And I love the school, but there are things that my family couldn't do when I was growing up because we didn't have the money.
We didn't just open Montessori. Montessori's been open for at least 3 years.
we
We
extend-
extended it.
we extended it.
And by the way, if those kids don't go to Montessori,
They're
they're
gonna-
coming back to our schools.
Right, it's gonna
So we're
co-
still paying for them one way or the other.
No, we're not paying for them in the same way.
Well, but when you close other schools, you still have the students, but you're saying you can close the overhead.
Yes.
Those other schools cost us
Inconsistent.
overhead because those were our schools. Those were our buildings
Whereas,
that we had to
whereas
maintain.
charter people complain they don't get as much money as other students
Well,
get.
let me get back to the point. The
Well,
bottom
this is
line
interesting. This is
that when-
democracy. This is what
Well,
we're
yeah,
talking about.
when you're in a hole, you need to stop digging. And we have a $9 million deficit, and the board has tied the superintendent's hands in terms of doing some of the things that she feels might be effective.
like hiring more $165,000 employees.
No,
but you know that's not digging a hole. I don't know what is.
You know what? Let me give you.
I tell you what digging a hole is.
Let me give you a good
Digging a
example. Let me give you a good example. When the superintendent told them that she would have to start to eliminate the deficit by cutting non-unionized employees first, and that meant part-time people, not all of them, but some of them. She told the board that, and then they had a press conference.
She fired 400 people that don't even work for us.
And then
I mean, you know.
and then well, that's not her fault that we didn't have a database that would tell us.
Now,
who
do you
worked for
guys
us.
realize they've switched positions now, which is legitimate because when you're talking about issues, they're complicated.
Right.
Now, Ed is arguing on the point that you got to let the superintendent do her job.
Absolutely.
Darnell is saying we got to watch because sometimes she did it wrong and how she went about it.
Try to help her.
But on the other hand, on the contracting issue, Ed was arguing that just because she said we should hire someone doesn't mean we shouldn't, and you said she did the good vetting.
Right.
She said she did.
So I'm
took her
saying
word
this
for it.
democracy.
I'm saying to him, be consistent. She asked for a talent
He
person.
said to me, be consistent.
I was just pointing out that you both
I
switched
know. She asked for a talent person, which is critical because that's the gatekeeper for everything that comes in the system, whether we retain people and what have you. And every district, every urban district has a
She
talent
hasn't made that
coordinator.
recommendation to us yet.
So
I don't even know why we're
I'm
arguing.
hoping that when
about
she does make the recommendation, Darnell, you'll vote for it.
Well, you know, I will make my votes based on the information that we receive and how it affects our budget. And the fact of the matter is, $165,000 talent director doesn't educate children. And I
What
know
is a
that it's
talent
important
director?
to have it.
The talent director is a person responsible for recruiting, retaining, providing professional development, dealing with labor disputes. And if you don't have a good one, you can actually lose money because you end up
And you could say that about a lot of administrative positions. And by the
Right.
way, guys, I honestly, in deep my heart, I'm not on either person's side here. So what's interesting to me about this discussion is everyone always says the way we're going to stop spending so much on education, which is often like just saying I want to pay taxes, cut the fat administration. It becomes like a jihad. And I think we always can, but I've never heard anyone identify more than one or two positions. Like at City Hall, they say cut the mayor's driver, which would be, 0.001% of the budget, which is fine if you think you shouldn't have it, but it's symbolic. With administrators, almost every position, I'm not saying every, but almost, and of course you can always reevaluate when years go by because times change who you need to do what job. But almost every position you can make a case for.
Well,
And when we're talking about structural deficits, we have to decide what, because so many jobs you could say we lose money by not putting that money up front,
Right.
but other times you say, but we just don't have the money to hire them, like you're saying about the Montessori
Paul, here's the
school.
point, though. When you're making cuts, you have to first look for redundancies. And there are some redundancies in our system. The second thing
What
you
would
have-
be examples?
well, we have 3 bilingual supervisors.
The superintendent recommended.
When we should have 1, and we should put the rest of that money into teachers for those
You
children.
should have that conversation
You
with the
need more.
superintendent.
You need more soldiers and less generals in this case.
If I were Carol Brooks, the superintendent, now if we're listening to this, every 5 minutes, my head be going like a tennis match. I'm saying, wait,
It's a hard
who's the
job.
guy on my
It's a-
side and who's the guy giving me a hard time?
I'm on the kid's side.
Well, I took a vow when I became a teacher to be kids. It's like the
Kids
the
first.
Hippocratic
So you're saying there
oath.
are redundancies. And Eric James wrote in, thank you
Oh,
for
I also-
listening. This should have been sanctioned by the New Haven Athletics Department. He means the debate. Oh, yeah. What I love about it is you guys are doing it in a good spirit. you know?
Well,
Very respectful.
a lot of people don't
Like, I
realize.
love you, bang. Yeah.
Well, it's like Wilder and Tyson Fury the other night.
That's
a
right.
lot of people don't realize that Darnell and I spend a lot of time together outside of board.
Yes.
But these are great issues. So you're saying, Ed, that in general, you have that while a lot of there are some redundancies, but I think you're both agreeing that sometimes you just can't afford positions you think you might like to have, even if they're good.
Wish.
Right.
I
With
wish.
the very interesting proposal by Ed to have 2 of the ESL, I guess the ELL supervisors
Yeah,
become
one.
teachers, but you're still not
No,
going to
no,
save a
not
lot.
have them become teachers. The cost savings should be redeployed to get teachers in front of those children.
Right, so you're not
Every-
saving money. That's not helping you with the $9
Right,
million
right,
deficit.
right. It's
So
just-
what's going to cut? Can you really? Because I'll admit I'm skeptical of this. I'm skeptical that you can eliminate a $9 million deficit by, quote, cutting the administrators. I'm not
Yeah,
skeptical
well,
that you find
the bottom
something.
line is
can't.
we don't have enough money.
You
Right,
can't.
but you also have to you have to write reports to government. You have to hire
Right,
people. You have to
to do that.
discipline people. You have to
Right.
write curriculum. Those are administrative jobs, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then everyone gets mad if you're not on top of it if there's a problem at a school, right?
Absolutely.
So where is this $9 million going to come from? So Darnell, you talk about cutting schools. How much do you save when you cut a school? You're still paying
Close
for the
to $2
student
million.
per school.
Mhm.
So why don't we just cut 4.5 schools?
I don't know if we could get to 4.5
I don't
schools
think
with the
so.
number of kids
That's
that we
funny,
have.
half, like
I
cutting
don't think
half.
so.
Listen,
condos
we're building a new school, Obama, right? The Obama school is going to have the ability to house, I think, 500 and some odd kids. We have 2 schools now, and they only have, I think, less than 200, around 200 kids in that school right now. So you could close at least one of the schools and have those kids populate that school and still have a little bit of room. So a lot of people complain about us building a new school. But
I
the
hear a
fact
lot
is,
about, and I don't think we should pick. I think we'd agree on this. Let's not pick on saying close the school for not performing well. That's that kind of.
I don't
corporate
think I
thing.
said
No,
that.
no.
You didn't.
No, you
I'm
didn't. He
saying
didn't.
I want to put that. You didn't. I'm saying let's put
Okay.
that aside
Right.
for the point I'm about to make. If we're talking about closed schools, we're not talking about what test scores are or something, because that doesn't really mean what you should have where. That's a different whole issue. But I hear a lot about West Rock Magnet School, not about how it's performing, but that it doesn't have a lot of people there. What are we doing with that extra building? Just what Darnell's talking about. When you have 200 students at a school, do we have extra capacity enough at other places to absorb them and save that $2 million per school?
I think you got to look into that. I think you have to look at what the occupancy rate is for schools, and if a school has X number of seats available.
So you just mentioned the
but it's
Obama
not-
school with
but
200
that-
students from
That's not the entire
Morris Sheridan.
calculus.
It's
though.
not. It's
because
not.
if you look at West Rock is doing well academically, and so
Could you have those same people just move into another
I
school
think you have
space?
to try to find a way to keep that
Right.
And they have that
environment while
writers cabinet,
moving it
which is
somewhere
cool.
else.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So do you think, would you two agree that we could close a couple schools and have that deficit?
I'm not ready to say that yet. Here's
Because no matter what school you cut, you're going to get a fusillade of opposition. No one likes to have a
Yes,
school
we
cut,
will.
and you're
Absolutely.
elected board of ed members, so
We got to get reelected, but you know what? At the end of the day, we still have to do the right thing.
Any other
Absolutely.
school? So you brought up one, Morris Sheridan, which has a beautiful building that could probably be sold for condos, one-time revenue.
I didn't bring up Morris Sheridan.
Oh, where would the 200 students come?
He mentioned West Rock.
Oh,
That
no,
there
but
were
you were
200.
talking about the Obama school. Where are they coming from?
They're
No, Donnell
coming
talked
from
about
Morrow. They're
Oh, right,
Morrow
Morrow.
school that's
Right,
moving
right,
over
right.
to
Oh, okay,
Obama.
so, okay, so
Well,
that was a good example.
I think one way to think about it. Let's say you had 10 hotels, and one hotel was fully, full occupancy, and then you had several other hotels that had 50.
Right, you're saying
vacancies here.
combine them and have
Right,
fewer
so you
buildings.
have to do that. But see, one of the things that is both a blessing and a curse is the magnet program.
I know that's been really
It's
re-examined.
problematic
Yeah.
because historically we have never addressed the aftermath of Brown in a way, particularly in the
and
the
you know
North.
what fascinates me is
in
what we
the
learned
North,
in the
we have-
last, and what
we-
fascinates me in the last year, and you guys are at the front line of this, is that we had a school, Hyde, that there were a lot of good reasons to close,
Right.
Creed.
but I'm sorry, Creed was renamed, but it was created, I believe, from Shefferson O'Neill, the desegregation
Yes.
lawsuit
Right.
decision, saying we're going to have magnet schools
Right.
that are regional to have greater racial balance. But then what happened in the end was that because African Americans from neighboring suburbs wanted to go,
Right.
we actually limited the opportunities of Black and Hispanic students because we said we need more white kids to reach
Right.
the goal
Well,
of this
see,
lawsuit.
that's the problem.
That was crazy.
But Paul, think about nuts. Think about
It is 2018. We're still
Absolutely.
talking to 1960
And they had that in
terms.
Hampton, too. They're closing schools in black neighborhoods
If
for that
you know
reason.
the history of desegregation movement, it has always been about the implicit assumption that in order for schools to be good, you have to have white kids in them.
Yes.
Right, and you have to be sitting next to
Right.
someone.
Now, I went to a historically black school, and I can count among my classmates people with PhDs in physics, biochemistry.
Right, this has been at the basis of
so on
debate for a
so
long time.
forth.
Then
Right,
other
right.
people come back and say, but the money follows the color, unfortunately.
Well,
And that-
the state has
but
to
the way to
rethink
fix
that.
that is to so you're saying don't racially desegregate schools.
No, I think
no.
it's more class related than it is race. I mean,
I think it's a combination, but here's the problem: how are you going to hold schools responsible for people leaving cities?
Yeah. So housing
So the
underlines it.
burden for desegregation has basically been on the backs of black people. If you go back to the
Right, they have to leave their neighborhood.
right,
And as we
right,
saw with
right,
Hyde,
look at- well-
I'm sorry, Creed,
absolutely.
Black and Latino students end up not getting opportunities that were created in the name.
Abs-
But that
absolutely.
just shows the unintended consequences of complex policy.
Absolutely.
But
Well-
do we still want racial? Do we care about
I don't think that
desegregation?
policy is so complex. I mean, they basically made it black and white. And the most interesting thing is so
There's a
fascinating thing
class
to
issue.
me is
There's a class issue. as you
it
indicated.
was what's even more fascinating to me is that they basically have said in their regulations that a white kid who has any black blood in them is no longer white.
Right.
So
That's
so
probably
you
all of
can't.
us.
That's like Louisiana. Was
Yeah,
it the
well,
164th?
It's like the 60s. I mean,
Right.
it's like what
That
you
is the
find.
problem with trying
Well,
to
it
solve
actually goes
complex
back- it goes
problems
back
where
to
we end up
slavery,
doing
really.
more harm and
Abs-
repeating some of the
absolutely.
underlying
Right.
prejudice.
You have to be more
Right,
creative.
right. And
than
if you
that.
want to use blood as an example, then everybody's an African. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
It's
So you know what
crazy.
some of us believe the solution is?
I mean, we were getting cited for not reaching our demographic goals in there because white
Right.
kids could not classify themselves as white because they may have had a Hispanic parent or a black
Which is also
parent
crazy
or a
because Hispanic
grandparent.
can
But
be.
Donnell,
It's just the same.
think about all white districts that no sanctions at all. You know,
They don't have to desegregate. They don't get the state money, so they don't get sanctions.
So some people think the only solution is to have neighborhood-based schools that are all good.
I agree.
They get enough resources.
I like neighborhood schools.
I agree.
But that
like
they
that.
have to be good.
Well, the school is
They have to get the money. They
the
got to have
school
the
is a
standards.
reflection of families that attend them, and that can be overcompensated for when you have strong leaders in those schools. Because if you look at the literature on effective schools for poor children,
Yeah, how are you feeling these days about Booker T? Is that doing the job? They started out pretty strong there. It's a school with mostly African American, large, low, and working class income.
I do know that
They're a charter.
there's a great leader at that school.
There is a great leader at that
He's
school.
a hard worker. He's a great guy. He puts a lot of time.
He defies
in.
the stereotypes
Absolutely.
that the charter bashes.
And that has been the narrative of every school in this country's history that has taught.
So school leadership is important.
It's very important.
But also,
But-
do we
but
live
the
and die
question-
too much
but
on
the- but the
numbers? Because the
question
numbers went
is-
up and down.
The question is it doing well?
And how do
we-
we decide if it's doing well? Because, I'm a skeptic of
There-
school test
How do you
scores.
decide?
I am
and-
too, Paul.
And do charters have a place in our school system?
What's your answer?
I know
My
that.
answer is yes.
My answer is
yes. They have a place.
My answer is that charters should be in the school district based on the original intent of charters. And
Which
that
is to have them be small with a lot
they
of
were supposed- they were supposed to
teacher-driven
be-
policy to
They were,
innovate.
no. They were supposed to be innovation sites for the largest
Right,
system.
created by the
So like laboratories. In fact, Al
the
Shanker,
American Federation of Teachers,
Al
Shanker.
Shanker.
So that was teacher-driven.
It was teacher driven, but as it evolved, it wasn't just teacher driven. It was that they were supposed to do education innovations and serve as laboratories for the largest system. And I happened to work with Al Shanker, did a book with him at Hebrew Union College. And so that's what Al wanted. I mean, it was teacher driven.
And now his union is one of the biggest opponents of charter schools.
Well,
They feel that the hedge
and-
funds have gotten behind
And
it.
so am
it's-
I. And it's not all charters though. I'm against charters that exact an administrative fee in above the award that they get.
But there's
Because
also
they
that
already have
issue of
administrators.
teachers'
They
unions.
have to pay- they have to
There's
pay-
an
and-
argument that
And I
people
don't
have
think a
that-
charter should. I think teachers should have a union in a charter.
Because some people argue that teachers' unions have been in the way of
No,
good
they're
farm.
not. They
New
have
Haven
not.
has defied that narrative.
Teachers union. I've worked all over the country. Teachers unions have been part of the solution, not part of the problem.
What do you think, Darnell?
I think unions are important for workers.
And what about charters?
Treated fairly.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with
think,
Ed?
I think that charters should. I think
Right,
that
three.
unions should be involved in any public institution.
You have three. You have one elementary, one middle, and one high school charter in any district of our size, and use them the way they were intended. And they should stop running around
We
thinking
have more than three charters.
they're better. I know we do. That's probably too many than
Now,
three.
by the way, Winter Green School might be closing in Hampton. Might not, but they're going to have to at least move. There are 100 New Haven students there. Are we ready to bring them into our school system? Is
we
there
will
capacity?
be. We will be. We'll be
Darnell?
glad to take them back.
I assume the superintendent will have us ready.
All right.
Give us your tired, your poor, your hopeless.
And that's an interest. That's also an interest. This whole magnet program has been a boon for the suburbs because when we talked about last year, or 2 years ago, we talked about doing
a fee.
an extra fee for those students to attend. Not only did they oppose it, but there was actually a quote in the newspaper from the West Haven superintendent who basically said, if we had to take all our kids back, we'll have to build a new school.
Absolutely.
So
But that was
and
that
Paul-
was a fustian bargain we made.
Paul,
We got money up
it
front from the
was.
state to build those schools in
Right.
return for in perpetuity keeping the slots open
Absolutely.
for suburbanites.
Here's another problem, and we
And-
need.
and I don't have a problem with the slots being open for suburbanites, but they should pay a higher.
But then
and we
the kids
should
go to the good
also
ones.
we
What's
should
that?
look we
Then
should
our
look
city kids can't get
we
in.
should look into whether or not we get a disproportionate number of special ed kids from the suburbs, because I've
Because we provide special
this
ed.
is
and
actually
better, yeah.
anecdotal,
Special ed's
but I've
expensive.
talked to a lot of parents who live in suburban communities, and the reason they have their kids in New Haven schools is because they're special need kids.
Yeah.
And we have a phenomenal leader in that,
Yeah.
Tiffany Jackson, and we do a good job with those kids, and many of those kids don't get that type of support.
But it really drives up our deficit.
There you go.
Black children make up 38% of the student body. They are roughly 1.64 times more likely to be suspended than the average student. It's much higher for boys, almost 10 to 1, I believe, if I remember correctly. Why is that happening? Is that something that should be addressed, and if so, how?
First of
Those
all,
are the questions that we're asking.
well, I like to opine on that. First of all, I think it rests on a historical foundation of the historical mistreatment of black people. And I think it's reflected in all of our institutions. Anytime a black man could be shot simply by living in his own apartment, that's a problem. And as a pro-Semitic African American, anytime people can be worshiping in a synagogue in Pittsburgh and be murdered simply because of their religious,
Or a church in Charleston.
a church in Charleston, then that's a problem. So there's a pecking order in this country with certain people at the very bottom that have been historically mistreated. Native Americans are at the very bottom. And if you look at the arc of history, African Americans, Jews, Latinos, Native Americans have been at the bottom of the social pecking order. And the real problem with a lot of us that come from those groups is internalized oppression. That sometimes even black people look at black children differently.
We do suspect,
and we have to change
It
that.
is amazing the things I did not get suspended for being a white kid in schools.
Well, we do suspect that there may be some structural issues related to that, but we don't know yet. So we've asked for more information.
And Tamika MacArthur writes
Yeah.
in, "Hey guys, yes, I love neighborhood schools too."
I want to say this too, though. Any person of color that's running a school where the kids, you should take care of all your kids. But I would think that if a black male is running or a Latino male is running a school, they should have a special consideration for all children, but especially those kids, because they should know what it's like. It's almost like the scripture in Exodus when the Jews are told, "Do not vex or oppress a stranger, for you were once strangers in Egypt." And as an African American male, when I was a principal at Hill House, when I was at assistant principal at Hill House, principal at Jackie Robinson, I made sure all my kids were taken care of. But I spent a lot of extra time with those young men.
Well,
and I think that part of it has to do with people who work in our schools understanding that it is not just a profession, it's a calling.
But we're seeing a positive trend in those numbers. If you look at those suspensions numbers, you'll see that we're having more in-school suspensions this year than we had last year. So they're moving towards trying to eliminate out-of-school suspension as much as possible. There are some schools that don't even have any suspension at all now.
Right.
We want to emulate that, of course, as much as we can. But someone said to me, there's some real kids out there that really need to have more discipline, and we can't ignore the fact that there are kids that are coming. And I said this, I forgot who I said it to, but these kids weren't born to be bad, and they weren't born to be suspended. So we have to find a way to change what's causing them to be in that position, to have those issues, because it's not just a structural issue. There are also, these kids are coming from homes, and I know when I went to school, if I got in trouble, there's no way I got suspended because if I did, I got home and I got an extra punishment that was much worse than being suspended. I don't know if these kids are getting that kind of discipline.
Plus, Ed Joyner was spanking your butt at Hill House.
Oh, all the way home.
Ed, you want to
This is really important, too.
Wish I could have gotten a video.
All of this is not on teachers. There are young people in our schools who are old enough to know the difference between right and wrong. And the school that I attended held, once you reached a certain age, it also held you accountable. So it's not just enough to say all these kids have been suspended. We need to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
Darnell can relate to this. When he was in high school, there was a young man that used to bully him. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I put that memory out of my head.
All right. Now, if I suspended the kid, that same kid tried to attack me with a weapon. Same kid that bullied him. Now, if that kid got expelled, whose fault would that be? Mine, Darnell, or the kid?
Should you expel the kid, or what should you do?
If somebody's trying to stab you or shoot you, they should be expelled.
I'll give you another example of
What
that.
happened with the kid?
In that kid's case, a lot of things happened, but I won't go into that.
I'll give you another example. When I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, I used to walk to school every day. And these two kids used to rob me every day for my money. And I could have went the other way, but for some reason, your 6 or 7 year old mind just doesn't think that. And I just kept going the same way. They just kept robbing me. Finally, I told my mother about it, and she told the school. They convened a meeting between me and my parents, them and their parents. They brought a police officer in to scare the kids straight, not to arrest them, just to scare them straight. Not only did those kids never rob me again, but we became good friends.
Right.
today we are still good friends.
I got
And-
beat up by some guy in elementary school, and I complained. And then when I got to junior high, he was waiting for me. He started beating me up again because he said, "You told on me."
But today, those kids, that's
You were a snitch.
But today, those 7-year-olds would have been arrested. They
Yeah.
would have been put in the
Right.
system because there's no tolerance. There's no they don't think outside the box. They just say punish them. We have to find a way to make these kids to work with these kids so that they're not punished, but instead are taught. That's what we
Right.
do. We teach, right?
Right. Right. And in the case of the kid that bullied Darnell and tried to hurt me, he's doing very well now. His daughter attended college. He gave me a great big hug at the last homecoming game. He came up here from down south, and that was because we reached out to him. We found out that he was the way he was because his father had left the home. There was no male figure there, and he was very angry about that, and he took it out on other people. There's no saying that hurt people hurt people.
Right.
And so I think it's incumbent on every principal to find out who the kids are in their schools that are likely to be problems and to bring those kids into their circle, to work with them, to meet with them, and to help them overcome some
Which is exactly the
challenges.
work that integrated wellness is doing right now.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's the work that we should train our principals and teachers to do. I have nothing against integrated wellness.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this.
I enjoyed you, Paul.
You guys are great.
Right now,
I love hearing how you can respectfully disagree.
Right.
Absolutely.
and
we
I'll-
did have a duel, just there were no rapiers.
We haven't had it yet.
No,
No, we
here.
haven't. We
Yeah,
haven't.
Oh, here.
It was
Okay.
a verbal duel.
Right, it was a verbal duel, and I just want the record to say that I love Darnell dearly. We often have meals together.
Yes.
We have his sisters and brothers are like my family. And
Our
his-
wives can't stay away from each other.
right, and his wife and his daughter are people that are very dear to me. So
All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot. I hope you'll come back.
we will.
Absolutely.
And thanks, Paul, for all the work you do. for
Eric
the
James
community.
said every kid needs a mentor and a person in the building who cares about them and works with them outside of academic work.
Amen.
Well, thanks.
Hallelujah.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the comments, folks. Thanks to Yellow Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. And thanks to today's guest, elected Board of Education members Darnell Goldson and Ed Joyner. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.